Welcome to the CinemaView podcast. I'm Darian Emler, and I'm joined by my sister Madison.
Thank you for having me here today. I'm very excited to start this podcast and to start some wonderful discussions about cinema and movie making and films we do like and films we are a little more disappointed in.
Just a few. Not complaining. One of our favorite directors for making wholesome family movies with artistic quality, by and large, is Steven Spielberg.
Absolutely.
Wonderful films that we enjoy over and over again. But we were recently rewatching War Horse, and when I first watched War Horse, and I think you did too, there is a disappointment in it, but I wanted to watch it again and make sure that wasn't just the mood I was in, because that's happened to me before when I'm watching films, and I was still disappointed.
It felt shallow, and it felt... Because, yeah, you can be affected by other things that are going on. You can feel extra sad, and then you watch something like War Horse, and it's like, oh, this feels so depressing, but we've had films where they felt depressing or sad, and then we rewatched them and we're like, oh, it wasn't that bad, it was just the mood we were in. But rewatching it, it definitely felt unfulfilling. It felt like Spielberg, but it felt...
empty and without hope.
Unfinished.
But rather than just complain, I want to be productive and proactive in examining how War Horse could have been better. And one more than that, I wanted to contrast it with a similar storyline that I believe went about the action much better, character-driven story much better, a movie I've seen over and over again since I was a child, 1943, Lassie Come Home. Lassie
and War Horse were kind of... As we were watching War Horse, I kept thinking about the film Lassie and how the stories contrast quite well.
A dog taken from her young owner, whom she loves, and her journey over hundreds of miles and much adversity to get back to her family.
Absolutely.
I highly recommend anyone who has not seen either of these films watch them first, because this will naturally contain spoilers for both of these films.
So both films sort of start out introducing the animals. In Lassie Come Home, one of the things I noticed is that you're introduced not just to the animal, but to the daily habits of Lassie. You kind of get a sense of the place that she lives, the people that she lives with, and her own personality. In just the first few minutes, you get a really nice introduction.
War Horse introduces the horse and the immediate environment and the supporting characters, but it doesn't immediately establish, like Lassie does, how the horse is special. They'll show the horse being spirited, and everyone says the horse is pretty, but that's not specifically why this horse is different than any other horse. There are lots of spirited, pretty horses. On the other hand, in Lassie, her character is immediately established as special by all the people that are around her, and not just superficially how she is special, but almost this miraculous sense of time. She has this musical cue of when her kid is coming out of school that she needs to be there, and I immediately establish that, and it will repeat through the entire story, but it's focused on the dog as a character, not creating this cartoon, overly humanized character, but something a dog would naturally do. A very special dog, would naturally want to be with their kid as soon as they get out of school. And they use that as the main character point for the dog's whole journey.
There's a slight extent of fantasy and a dreamlike state, but there is a basis on reality. There are dogs who are that close to their owners. And to show the everyday habits of people can practically set their watch by Lassie when she's coming home by school, waking him up in the morning, all of those little habits sort of establish that this isn't a freak happenstance of, oh, she's suddenly enlightened, and it establishes that there is this special spark, and it kind of gives you a reason for why the movie exists in the first place.
Yeah, as opposed to Warhorse, why is this specific horse special? Why should we be following this horse's journey?
And why so many people thought it was special. Like, I could understand the boy finding it to be special, but why did his father go out on a limb and go into debt to buy the horse, and then why do all of these other people kind of consider it special, but then treat it normal, then to call it special again?
But the greatest difference comes as the story starts to get established, as either animal is taken from their original owner. In the first place, you have Lassie Come Home, in which the sale of the animal happens without the boy knowing.
Right.
He only comes home and finds out. And in some ways, I felt that was stronger than the boy just standing there arguing with his dad in Warhorse. It felt anticlimactic. But the real key is, in Lassie Come Home, the repeat return initially.
Mm-hmm.
It establishes a dynamic of Lassie wants to come home. You're very firmly established.
There's
because
an awareness.
You don't have the words to establish why this dog as a character would do it. But you understand the inward motivation to go on this little journey that kind of sets you up for the excitement of the really big journey that's to come.
Absolutely. And they gave it enough time in having that separation, then coming back together, separation, coming back together. It gave you time to feel sorry for the boy and feel like you're really rooting for the dog, because they took the time to introduce you to get to know the animal, and that was the focus. The title is Lassie, or the title is Warhorse. You're supposed to be focusing on the animal and its relationship to the person.
Exactly. You said feel sorry for the boy, and by all means, the human characters should be very strong there, because it's difficult to tell a story about just animals. All the characters in a film should be strong. But it's the title of the movie. Very key scenes that establish Lassie as a thinking, feeling character, where, at least in the beginning of Warhorse, you don't see very many scenes where the horse is established as a thinking, feeling, caring for the boy character.
Yeah.
When Lassie wakes up the boy in the morning before he goes to school, all this is happening within minutes of the beginning of the story. Wakes him up to go to school. He falls back to bed. Lassie comes into the room, and there's this wonderful close-up of her looking back at him in the bed, and then running in to go wake him up. And without seeming overly humanizing of the dog, you could see the dog's thought process through how the director filmed its eyes.
Yeah. With Warhorse, for instance, when they're doing the field plowing scene, and the horse's owner, the boy, keeps telling him, okay, come on, Joey, come on, do this, do that. There is no time given for the horse to think, and the camera never comes close enough, for well, at least majority of the movie, the camera never comes close enough to the horse that you can see its eyes really think about things until like the last 20 to 30 minutes of the film. But those first few supposedly bonding moments with the boy and the horse looks like it's just standing there, and it's really Joey's owner that is getting all of the attention and the excitement and emotion and feeling.
Except and the story knows the story's supposed to be about the horse, so it feels like it's limping along, telling the secondary character's story and not the primary character's story.
It's like everybody has this over-exaggerated view of this average horse, and that makes it feel very odd. Mm-hmm. It's almost humorous to be like, what's special about the horse? It just seems like a normal horse.
And going back to the horse plowing the field, there is no indication that the horse succeeding in doing it is anything other than just an average horse plowing a field. There's no specific sign of intelligence or a character trait that cues you in on what this horse is capable of, who this horse is as a character.
No glint of thought, like, oh, I'm figuring this out, or really not enough time, even though they spent 40 minutes trying to connect you to the boy and the horse and show their relationship. It does not feel like they take a lot of time to really develop the horse's personality or its connection to want to please the boy.
And there's a lot of talk about a lot of different incidents that have nothing to do with the horse. One thing I liked about Lassie is the characters often brought the conversation, number one, back around to discuss the dog, as they should, it's the main character. Number two, they very quickly establish in Lassie the mechanism for her parting with the boy. They very quickly establish the family is impoverished, that she is their one valuable, saleable item, and that they need to sell her to live. They don't immediately inform the boy of this, they give time to build that suspense, but you immediately have that clue into what the inciting incident's going to be.
Well, it adds pressure to the story because they've obviously waited until the last minute. It's the last thing that they have to sell. It gives a tension and an extra emotion and realistic quality that they've waited and waited and waited, and Lassie is the last thing that they could sell. Whereas in Warhorse, it was kind of confusing to me why...
They have to pay the rent, they're behind. They're in a similar situation as a family. They're a rural family that's impoverished. However, there is no direct line of how them being impoverished is getting the story going. Well, the dad is foolish and ends up buying the horse, but that doesn't establish how the horse is going to get sent on its journey.
It doesn't make sense to me why he bought the horse in the first place in regards to storytelling.
It might have been better if his son had gone with him. His son was impressed with the horse. If they both were there, that might have given a little bit more of an emotional hook to hang your hat on.
That's what I was thinking. The father character seems kind of useless to me in the grand scheme of story.
His purpose in the story.
Yeah, I would have found the story much more believable if perhaps the son and his mother were alone, like the father had died in a previous war, and the son rashly bought the horse. He saw his opportunity to finally get the horse that he wanted, and that would make sense because that's what a young man might do.
Absolutely. But the strongest difference, I would say, is once the horse is separated from his family. Once Lassie is separated from her family. When Lassie gets to Scotland, she has been told by her kid, I give you up. She's escaped and come back several times, and the kid finally says, go, don't come home. I love you, but you need to go do this.
Yeah.
She stays until she's abused, and then she starts a journey back home. Lassie makes a choice, and she'll meet lots of different people along the way, spend time with them, but then realize she has to continue on her journey. As opposed to Warhorse, which through the entire film almost seems randomly drugged through. People make choices, owners die, she gets transferred to new owners, they die, she gets transferred to new owners, she gets taken from them. And only toward the end, which is probably the strongest point of Warhorse, both for the horse driving the story as a character should, making choices.
Right.
Not that things happen that are obstacles, but the main character should be making choices that are going towards a goal. That's the strongest point, is the end, where the horse is both making choices and it's showing emotion just by where it's looking with its eyes, like looking at a dying friend. Lassie Come Home, conversely, the dog is making choices to head home. It encounters characters, it stays with them for a while, it has sort of a mini beginning, middle, and end with those characters. It leaves very definitely to continue on his journey home, as opposed to just being dragged along by circumstance.
I think that is the thing that bothered me most about Warhorse. Because both were beautifully shot. There's no doubt
done.
beautiful soundtracks, beautiful cinematography. However, that's definitely one of the things that bothered me the most with Warhorse, was that it focused so much on the people. The horse did a few amazing things, mostly at the end, but the horse didn't do much. Even at the end, the boy had to convince the doctor to not shoot him. The boy had to convince the other guy to not take him away after he bought him at auction. Every point, the sergeant that took him under wing, the horse under wing, all of these people that the horse meets, it doesn't focus on the horse or how the horse changes the people that it meets. It focuses basically, the horse is there, things happen to the people, good or bad, and the horse just kind of is moved along like a set piece almost.
Yeah. And even more simple things like establishing the horse having emotions. There's a stark lack of not human emotions, but slightly more complex emotions. Like, you'll see Lassie get mad when she's abused. You'll see her get scared and get really close up on her face during a thunderstorm. Simple little things of establishing realistic emotion in an animal character make a big difference in feeling empathy for this animal character.
When she's leaving the elderly couple, she looks back over her shoulder like, are you sure it's okay that I'm leaving you? Because she was staying there because they were helping her to get back on her feet so she could continue her journey, but she was staying there out of politeness. There were certain character developments. You knew what Lassie was, you knew that she was special. They proved it at the beginning, and then each person she meets, the character is strengthened by her consistency and personality.
Exactly. And the side characters that come into her life as she passes through aren't just wasted or slapped on feeling. They both help her in her journey, and they both also realize what her journey is. They come to realize what her journey is, thereby reinforcing that main character's goals.
Absolutely.
She's going somewhere, as opposed to, wow, that's just kind of a neat horse.
Yeah. I think another important aspect, obviously they should not be the exact same. You know, each film should have its own unique personality. But there were certain characters that I felt you could cut out of Warhorse. It didn't make sense why some people had the horse. And then I realized, and I don't know if you saw this, they were trying to express the whole entire story of World War I. So you got the German children that had enlisted and ran away from the army that were shot. And then you had this French girl, and then you had the Irish and the English, and kept on going back to the German side and then the English side. I felt like they bit off more than they could chew. Like, there was no one flow to it. They kept trying to express all of the angst, all of the troubles of World War I into one film and one story about a horse.
And in no way was that better exemplified for me in the initial cavalry charge that they showed. You're 5 minutes into this charge, and my thought was, where's the horse? All of a sudden I was like, where's the horse?
You can't find it. It's like this massive amount of horses.
This is the main character. Where's the main character?
And I began to feel disappointed and sort of going, I don't care anymore, because they did go through so many people and so many of them ended in death. I really wanted to know more about this sergeant that had been so kind to the horse's owner, and I thought that they were going to expound a little bit more on
the
that
officer.
sergeant, the officer.
Just a little detail that could have lifted his character and his interaction with the horse. It was emotional when he realized that he was running right into the machine guns. But in Lassie, you often see the animal reaching out a paw, pressing into someone to show a sign of affection. Another emotional attachment, and showing that this character has feelings and that two characters have feelings for each other. It would have been so much more powerful if, just a simple thing, him leaned down and touched the horse as he realized he's about to die. It would have shown you the horse more in that scene, and then been more powerful when the horse runs by without anybody on the saddle.
Absolutely.
But that little show of affection would tie this supporting character to the main character and then show their exit from each other in a much more meaningful way.
And they kept going to the other fellow officer on his horse. It felt like a distraction for me. It's like, no, I want to see like at least a satisfying ending, but you don't get that satisfying close of a chapter. You just go to the other officer that survived. They take his horse and put it with Joey.
And the kid, you're trying to establish that this main character horse is really special. And all the kids focused on is how special the other horse is. It seems like that makes the idea of this horse is something really nice, really unique, kind of limp along if
and then the
someone
German
else
officer
is thinking about this horse is really special. The most wonderful scene for me in establishing the horse's character, the horse has an eye line where it goes and looks, and you feel what the horse is looking at and thinking about, is when it replaces its friend in the line to bring the gun up to the top of the hill.
That was great.
That was a wonderfully done scene. Not repeat the same exact action, but I wish that same amount of thought of showing where the horse is looking, giving you an impression what it's feeling, was done throughout the entirety of the film, because that's a wonderful scene.
The horse, Joey, the main character, chose to sacrifice himself in an essence. You could see the choice being made. There was some cognition there of, no, take me, don't take my friend who is injured. And they did it again when his friend finally does die. You can see the reaction there. And oddly enough, I felt more compassion and emotional connection to the handler, that German handler that was that was taking care of both of them, than I did with the horse's owner, than I did with the two German kids that took them and when they were running away from the army, which made my feelings very confused because there are some characters, side characters, that I'm having more emotion for than the little girl in France or the main character. One of the key things I learned about filmmaking watching both of these was, if you have a story and you want to get this certain message across, don't bite off more than you can chew. I think that was probably the main issue. Lassie was condensed, it was precise, it gave a lot of time to show the passage of time. I noticed little things like the grandma knitting a sweater. Over the passage of time, you can see the sweater grow, or you see the trees slowly turning from green to the last little tidbits of autumn leaves.
But it doesn't have to take too much time, because the sweater, in between cuts, all that happened in about 3 minutes.
Absolutely. So the thing with Warhorse, kind of reiterating what we were talking about earlier, it felt massive. They took on all of World War I, and I just wanted it to be a little bit more concise and focused on one or two main points with a few extra trimmings, as it were.
There's nothing wrong with a longer movie as long as you don't lose your main character in it.
And that style works. Steven Spielberg's great at having these big stories, but sometimes even the best director can still bite off more than he can chew, or he will try to make it something bigger than it really is. And that can be a wonderful lesson for young filmmakers to realize that you don't have to always have bigger and bigger and bigger stories. Sometimes it's better to try to scale it down and have it just be very basic framework that you spend a lot of time perfecting the simple framework.
Putting feeling into each interaction, establishing what that character wants and how they're going to go get it, and the obstacles that stand in their way.
Yeah.
Directly in their way. Not the whole world is an obstacle, but what obstacle stands in the way of their specific goal.
Yeah.
So if I had to sum up the difference between the two stories and the emotion you're left with because of how these two similar stories are told, if you take a character and they are randomly brought through a bunch of hardships and happen to make it back to their family, you feel like, wow, that was 1 in a million, but not in a special way. That was just one character that happened not to have something bad happen to them in the end, rather than a character like Lassie that's driving the story, that with intelligence and dedication makes it back to her family. That's an empowering story that, despite the sadness and the hardship, leaves you with a feeling of hope.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and be sure to click the bell to receive notifications.